Hey there, I'm Stephanie Stiavetti from Fearless Fresh, and I want to talk about the sour cream coffee cake recipe that I just posted. So I really love this recipe. It's super versatile, it's super flexible, and it's super flavorful, right? Those are like three things that we really want to find in a recipe, especially when we're learning to cook on our own without a recipe. So I particularly love this cake because the lemon zest gives it kind of like a brightness, and then the vanilla gives it kind of like a warmth, right? And then the sour cream used as a fat in the cake gives it like this beautiful tart flavor and really tender, light texture. It's really, really good. But here's why this cake is so flexible. So I added lemon zest, I added vanilla, and then I used a walnut streusel on top, right? Now you can totally mix and match this cake to make it however you want, but some substitutions will work and some will not. So let's talk about those. So first of all, using sour cream as a fat is really easy. You just mix the sour cream in, but you can also substitute plain yogurt if that's what you've got. It'll be a little less like heavy and fatty as it would be with the sour cream because the sour cream has more fat in it, but yogurt will work just as great. If you've got any extra yogurt laying around, this is a great use for it. Same for any extra sour cream you've got laying around. If you wanted to spice it up a little bit, you could add spices, probably a teaspoon or two total to the cake batter to make it more seasonal. If you wanted to add some cinnamon and cardamom and clove to make it kind of apple spicy. If you wanted to add chopped apples, you could add a half a cup of chopped apples or a half a cup of candied citrus peel, a half a cup of chocolate chips, whatever you want. This cake, like I said, is super versatile, so you can kind of mix it up a little bit and make it your own. But if you want to make it dairy-free, you're going to run into a problem because the sour cream that's in here is actually made with dairy, right? And it's a big part of the cake's flavor and its texture, and that's due to the chemistry of the cake, right? All baking recipes are like a science experiment, right? Like when you're cooking something on the stove that's savory, it's very flexible. You can kind of do whatever you want. But when you're baking, you're basically creating a chemistry experiment. And the reason why the recipe is the way it is because it holds together with those particular ingredients and those particular amounts. So if you want to swap out the sour cream to a dairy-free sour cream, you can try it. But you might run into some problems because dairy-free sour cream has emulsifiers and other stuff in it that keep it feeling and tasting like sour cream when it doesn't have any dairy in it. So if you want to make this cake with a gluten or a dairy-free sour cream, go for it. But then email me at help@fearlessfresh and let me know how it goes, and I'll update the recipe so that I can let everybody else know as well. So there's a lot of butter in this recipe, which is totally fine. If you want to swap it out for olive oil, you can. That's why this cake is so flexible. You'll have a slightly different flavor and a slightly different texture, but it will come together pretty much the same. Or if you wanted to use vegetable oil or some other like coconut oil, you could do that as well and give it a nice coconutty flair. Now, one more thing about this cake that you need to know. When we bake it, we put the streusel on top and then we bake it in the oven. Now, if you were to try and make this cake in a regular everyday cake pan and you try to get out of the pan, you would have a real problem because how do we get a cake out of a regular cake pan? We invert the pan and we turn it upside down and we get the cake out. And if you were to do that with this particular cake, you would end up with streusel all over the place because the streusel is baked into the top of the cake and inverting the cake would just cause the streusel to fall off and you would have a huge mess. Now the way that you can work around this is with a cheesecake pan, and I'm going to show you one right now. This is a cheesecake pan, right? It looks like a regular cake pan, but you hear that? That's because the bottom comes out, right? You can see that the bottom comes out of this pan so that you can put your hand up and remove the cake that way. It makes it much easier. You can also make this cake in a springform pan. This is a springform pan right here. The way this guy works is it's got a little spring on the side, and then you remove the bottom and the bottom comes off. Makes it really easy. Or you're feeling really adventurous, like we do in regular pastry kitchens, we just use a pastry ring. Now, a lot of people, when I show them this, they're like, how the hell do you bake a cake in there? There's no bottom. It's actually very simple. So what happens is you put the cake on a baking sheet that's lined with parchment. Cake batter is very thick. So when you put this on the parchment and you leave it where it's at and you put the cake batter in the middle of it, the cake batter is not going to ooze out of the bottom. You cannot move this once you filled it with cake batter for obvious reasons, but the cake batter will stay where it's at inside, and then you bake it, and then when it's done, you just pull it off, boop, and you have a cake with a flat bottom and no bottom of a pan. It actually works really well. So somewhere on this page is either the recipe itself or a link to the recipe, which is hosted on Fearless Fresh, which is the place to go if you want to learn how to become a faster, more creative, more efficient home cook. If you have any questions about this recipe, go ahead and leave them, and I will answer them as soon as I can. Thanks.